Flo, I could kiss you.
Just don't die. That'll do me. Save your kisses for what's her face.
Who?
They're acting different around her.
She's just an associate.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Haunting the Narrative. We are thrilled to be here with you again today. I am Meg, also known as Menina123 on AO3 and Menina89 on Tumblr, and I am joined by...
Hi, this is Lizzie. I'm Sharako Orion on the internets.
Hi, this is Natasha, and I am Hail Chi-Chi on the internet.
They are lucky because no one else had taken their name on Tumblr already, so they get to be the same everywhere, unlike me. But the three of us are thrilled to be here with you today, with Valentine's Day coming up, to discuss Locklyle, also known as one of the reasons many of us got into this series to begin with.
Despite the fact that Stroud specifically says he was not trying to write a romance, it is the thing we are all most insane about. It's going to be a very serious discussion.
Very serious.
Well, I think you all meant that as a joke. I do think that this is a serious conversation, because as kind of, I would say, the number one romance defender of the podcast, I think that even though romance frequently gets dismissed as being fluffy or frivolous, that it is really a valid genre. And I think a lot of that dismissal is because romance is a genre that is generally typically enjoyed and written by women. And our society does not usually appreciate things that women enjoy or value, I would say. And I think there's also something really valuable about books and stories that prioritize love and relationships and people coming together and forming meaningful partnerships. And while Stroud, I think, would never call himself a romance writer, I think he does these things incredibly well through Lockwood & Co.
I think that's a really interesting point because we talked in, I think, the Lockwood episode about how he has to move from nihilism to finding meaning, and then he's allowed to connect. That's what enables him to connect to Lucy and to have this human connection, and that's what it's all for. That's the whole point. So, yeah, I agree. I think romance is very important. Human relationships are really important.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a series that at the end of the day, one of the major lessons of it is the importance of human connection, the importance of building relationships with other people. And romance is just one of many ways that those relationships exist.
Okay, so we are having a serious discussion. Great.
A very serious conversation. And we're going to kick it off by kind of unpacking the things that we think make Locklyle so compelling. And the first thing we're going to talk about is, of course, chemistry.
I was told there would be no science.
Lizzie is the one here who is actually has a background as a scientist, which is the ironic thing people at home might not realize. So about her making that joke. But we all came to Lockwood & Co. through the show, which is, I think, true of a lot of people in the fandom.
Yeah, we've probably got like old school book stands listening going, no, not me, I'm better than you. And yeah, you are. Okay, we'll give you that. The rest of us plebs found the show first.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about the show in a future episode, but one of the best things I think we can all agree that the show did was the casting of Ruby and Cameron and their insanely good chemistry. And I think that contributes to the appeal of Locklyle for a lot of people.
That's funny. I've seen a lot of people ask, like, oh, I've got a friend who's trying to get into Lockwood & Co. Where should I start them in the series, in the show? And I'm like, just start them at the beginning. There was nothing better than that banter the two of them have just walking down the street. It was a wonderful introduction, and there was so much chemistry right away. And credit to the screenwriters on that. That banter scene was fantastic.
The thing from the beginning that always gets me is the way Lucy hears Mr. Hope falling down the stairs, and then Lockwood's just hanging out against the wall laughing at her. And the way he's looking at her, I'm pretty sure that's kind of the moment that really hooked me in.
I actually think there's a lot of great non-verbal reactions that the two of them have back and forth. That's a really good one. Every time she's mad at him and he gives her a hangdog look is fantastic. Her rolling her eyes because he forgot the chains.
Yeah. Taking an extra biscuit and be so vicious with it. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, there's the very dramatic scene at the very beginning of the first episode where she falls and stumbles like through the stairs because of, through the railing of the stairs rather, because of Annabelle Ward's ghost. And then he has to grab her, and just like the like tension in that moment and the eye contact, it is like palpable.
Which is quite funny because in both the show and in the book, that happens after he sees her hanging off the stairs, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna go chase the ghost first," and just leaves her hanging there.
Right.
Because he's 15 and an idiot. Yeah.
She'll be fine.
Well, I think he's afraid that in his defense, I think he's afraid that if he grabs her the first, the ghost will get them. Like, you know, I think he has a reason, but yeah, it is fun.
I mean, there's a lot of wonderful teen awkwardness also. Things like that. Boys showing off. The moment when they jump apart. I mean, I probably should say about the argument in episode 4, but the moment at the end when they've had that moment and then they jump apart from each other. I love those little moments as well. Yeah,
and that's after he's like bandaged her hand and they're kind of they're not really holding hands, but they're touching. It's very sweet.
She gives him some wonderful heart eyes, too, several times. The one that comes to mind most is after he gives her the grade 4. She's looking at him all doe-eyed. I think at the very end, when they're in the kitchen, the very, very end of the series, she's looking at him. And he's looking at her, and his look is very different from hers. She's looking very, like, almost soppily. And he's much more guarded. He's much more like, shit, what do I do about all these feelings I'm having?
Ooh.
So, yeah, fantastic acting, fantastic chemistry.
Excellent. Yeah, and one of the other things that happens several times throughout the show that I think is a really nice detail is, like, Lockwood does this kind of, like, I don't know how to describe it besides, like, a slide handhold where he kind of, like, reaches for her arm and then, like, slides down and, like, holds her hand. He does it at the end when they're having their, like, argument, and he, like, gives her the dramatic speech about how she needs to stay, and he does it there. He does it when he says, "You're part of our team," after Bickerstaff's. There's, like, a couple of other moments. It's just, like, a very, like, nice moment because he's almost doing it unconsciously, it feels like.
Oi, where's his slap?
Yes, that's another good one.
But all of this, I think their chemistry in the show is just so good, and it really makes it believable that these people are so into each other despite having only known each other for like a week.
Yeah, it feels so natural.
When you went and read the books, and it's not nearly as obvious, like straight off the bat, that these two are into each other.
See, I think in the books it is very obvious that they're into each other, but it's a lot more restrained, isn't it? They're a lot younger, but it is a lot more restrained. But then people say, you know, the show showed you what Lucy's not seen. And when you do like someone, you're a bit oblivious sometimes, aren't you?
That's a good point.
Yes, that's a very good point. But it is totally different to write chemistry in a book than it is to show it on a show, especially when you have actors as talented as Cameron and Ruby. But Stroud, thankfully, I think is a master at really doing a lot of very good showing, but not telling. And making the relationship, I think, to many of us, obvious, even if it isn't explicit. And I mean, we've teased him a little bit already on this episode about how he clearly didn't want to write a romance. Like, that was not his number one goal with this book. But part of that is also because it wouldn't have been appropriate, because technically this is children's literature. Like, this is middle grade, I think, is what it's usually considered. But also, I listened to an interview with him that he gave last year recently, where he talked also about how he feels very strongly that they deserve their privacy, which is why we don't get to see, like, the final scene at the end of The Empty Grave when they go on their walk together, which I just think is adorable that, like, he created these characters, and yet he's like, they deserve their privacy.
All the fic author's response with, that's sweet, but no.
How many versions of that walk scene are there out there now?
Oh gosh, has anybody counted? That'd be amazing. It's got to be in the hundreds.
My favourite is the one where they're all bandaged up and like they tried to kiss and it's just ouch, that hurts.
Honestly, I think that's a very realistic version. But I mean, I have written a version where Lucy faints the first time
I remember
Lockwood
that.
kisses her. So.
Because she had internal bleeding or something from getting stabbed.
Yeah, she was just like totally overwhelmed and like passed out.
Also very relatable.
I do remember like Stroud in an interview somewhere. I feel like it was a written one. And he said that when he got the concept for Lockwood and Co., you know, he just kind of had this idea, and it was a boy and a girl, and they were standing on a doorstep, and they were in love with each other, and they were children, and they were there to fight ghosts. And I like the way that he just says they were in love with each other. It's one of the building blocks of the series, but it's just kind of one of the facts in the world.
That's fascinating. I actually want to talk about when we think they fell in love with each other, because I've heard that Stroud says they were in love with each other from, you know, the get-go, that it was a love at first sight kind of thing. I've heard him say that Lockwood doesn't fall in love with her until Coombe Carey, and the show and the books are maybe different. So what do you guys think? Like, not what's in canon, not trying to provide like real objective evidence, but what do you guys think? When do you feel like they fell in love?
No, anybody listening is just hearing silence right now, but me and Meg are both kind of staring at the ceiling while we think about this one.
I see steam coming out of their ears.
Well, it's more trying to collect my thoughts because I have too many of them about this question, as someone who has tried to parse this out in fic before. I mean, I think we all agree that they are immediately attracted to each other. I think that's maybe strong. And my feeling is that at least that's stronger on Lucy's end initially. And maybe it takes Lockwood a little bit longer, even if it's there.
Yeah, certainly you see it immediately because you've got Lucy's point of view and she's immediately taken with him. Her descriptions of him are so unhinged right from the get-go.
See, I disagree with this. I actually think it's stronger on Lockwood's end at first. Because Lucy's descriptions of him, okay, she's quite taken with him, but the way she describes him is more as a supervisor. You know, she's happy that he's showing leadership, that he seems like someone she can trust in the dark.
He's such a good colleague.
It's not so much just he's such a good colleague, but it's someone that she trusts to have her back. And when she meets him, she's 2 weeks off being completely abandoned by her supervisor. So, you know, she's kind of messed up at that point. But especially that banter at the beginning of the Screaming Staircase, where they're discussing what he was putting on an accent for an Irish dock worker. And then when they get in there, he's like, "Oh, I see a death glow, Lucy. Is it a vole size? Yeah, it's probably a vole. So it's not really related. No, it's not really related." You know, all of this, it kind of screams a boy who's trying to impress his crush. You know how teenage boys are just kind of idiots and they're show-offs and they're not necessarily doing it right. And I feel like Lockwood is definitely playing into this. Given what we know about Lockwood's personality, it's probably driving him up the wall because he wants to stop playing the fool, but he keeps doing it and he can't stop and he doesn't know why. But I think the fact that he's already kind of at that point means he might be a little bit deeper. You know, he might be a bit more into Lucy than Lucy is into him. But then I also think Lucy's extremely vulnerable at that point in time. And she's probably too messed up to really know.
That's entirely possible. Although I do think teen boys will do anything to impress any teen girl.
Yeah. Well, there's not many in the vicinity, so.
What do you think about Coombe Carey? Do you think something changed at Coombe Carey?
So Stroud has said that. I tried so hard last night to track down the interview where he said this, but he has said in an interview that Coombe Carey is where either Lockwood fell in love with Lucy. I think it's, though, still debatable if he was aware that he was in love. Like, I think his emotional repression is so strong, especially at that point, that, like, maybe, you know, 5 years later he'd look back and be like, that's when I fell in love, you know? But, like, did he realize that in the moment? I do not think he did.
I think it's possibly where Lockwood realised that what he feels for Lucy is a bit more than just, oh, pretty girl nearby.
Oh, that's why I can't stop being such an idiot around her. Oh, this is starting to make sense.
Something like that, probably.
Right. I was going to say, I think the next kind of big moment in their relationship where things might have shifted or someone might have had a realization would be Winter Garden, right? Because definitely their behavior, there's a lot of tension leading up to Winter Garden, and then things change after Winter Garden.
See, I think pre-Winter Garden, there's definitely because by the hollow boy, I think Lucy's actually aware of her feelings for Lockwood, and she's also seems to be aware that they are somewhat reciprocated, you know?
Interesting.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I think back, even when you go back to the scene in the Whispering Skull where Lockwood gives her Jessica's necklace.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think he is aware on some level in that scene, even if he can't admit it to himself yet. Like, he is doing that. That's not something you do casually. That's not something you do to, like, a girl you just like, who's just an associate or just a friend.
And it's not something Lockwood would do casually either.
No.
Mm-mm. Even though he acts totally casual, he just chucks it at her.
Yeah, chucks it at her.
Close your mouth.
Close your mouth. Oh, look, taxi's here.
Right, but to me, there's something there. And then I agree with Natasha that by the time the Hollow Boy starts, I think Lucy is aware of her feelings, even if she's maybe won't admit them. And I think that she somewhat knows that something is reciprocated because she talks about how they've grown so much closer, and then like that he's kind of being hot and cold with her. But the very fact that like he was, it implies that there was some level of reciprocation there.
Yeah, later she says that she believes that there's a connection there, but she doesn't trust his ability to sustain it. That's jumping ahead a little bit. What do you think about Winter Garden? Do you think something happened there?
I think that's when Lockwood came to terms with it. And he completely panicked, basically, as a result.
Yeah, I think maybe up until Winter Garden, Lockwood was kind of like, you know, he kind of had this thing with Lucy, and he knew he had this thing with Lucy, but it was just a thing. You know, they were friends, they were colleagues, they're also kind of, and it's fun, but it doesn't really need a name to it. You don't really need to think about it any deeper than what it already is. And then Winter Garden happened, and he went, oh, okay, yeah, this is actually like love with a capital L. And I just don't have time for that.
Well, and I don't know how to cope with that. Like, he's most likely never been in love before, as far as we know. I highly doubt it, considering he's supposed to be like 15 or 16. He doesn't, he's an orphan. What models does he have of how to have a relationship? He has none at that point, basically.
I always find it interesting how he says he didn't trust himself in an operative situation around her after Winter Garden. And I always kind of wonder, like, what's that meant to mean? Because I'm not quite sure what abject, mistakes he made at Winter Garden.
I mean, he definitely made some mistakes at Winter Garden, but I think what he means in that point is that he is now so worried about Lucy, and he's so focused on Lucy, he's not making the right decisions for the team or the right strategic decisions. He's making decisions based on his feelings for Lucy. And that he's compromised, right? He can't use good judgment around her. And whether that means he's going to push her away and make her go sit in an iron circle 3 stories away, or whether it means he's going to keep her really close when he probably shouldn't. Either way, he's compromised.
That makes sense.
I think he's been in denial for so long. He's kind of known, but he can kind of repress it and push it to the back of his mind. He's very good at compartmentalization. And when Holly shows up and all the jealousy and all the tension and everything that's happening in the house, and things kind of come to a head at Winter Garden where neither of them can really deny their feelings for each other anymore. Neither of them can deny that the other person reciprocates them. It's all too obvious. But they're still not able to talk about it or come to terms with it.
So I actually kind of have, while I agree that that's a very valid interpretation of the line about how he didn't trust himself with her, the way that it's phrased in The Hollow Boy has also kind of made me wonder if he kind of chickened out from saying more. Because at first he just said, if I'm correct, at first he just says, I didn't trust myself to be with you. And then Lucy pushes him and she's just like, in what way? Or what do you mean? And he's like, oh, well, in operative situations, of course. And it kind of seems to me there that maybe he wanted to say more. And then he falls back into we're colleagues and talking about work. But maybe he just didn't trust himself with her in other ways as well, because he realized he had this romantic attachment to her and he didn't know what to do with that.
And do you think Aikmir's pushes him to a new realization? along this sort of, instead of like there being like a moment of, oh, clearly this is where they fell in love, instead we're developing this entire like, here's how their feelings changed over the entire series, which maybe is what makes it so compelling.
It's not really how their feelings changed though, is it? It's more like how their recognition, acknowledgement of their feelings changed. And I do think Aikmir's was a big thing because they saw each other die. You know, I mean, there is no way that Lockwood thought Lucy was alive when he went down after her. He knew she was dead. And he flat out says it. He says, I saw your candle and that's when I knew you were alive. So he climbed all the way down after her thinking she was dead. And I'm pretty sure if you watch somebody you love, even if you just watch someone who's a very good friend, you know, die, you're suddenly going to think all of this tension, all of this back and forth, all of these problems that were in my mind, none of that really matters anymore. You know, and I wish we could get a do-over. And then somehow, miraculously, she was alive.
Right. And they do have that conversation then where he opens up to her. And, of course, we have the famous come off it, you know I'd die for you line there. He really opens up to her, not only with that, but also talking about his past, talking about Jessica. We learn a lot about him in that scene. So he is really trying. So I think that's definitely a shift. A big shift for him. If anything, it's maybe less of a shift for Lucy, although she does open up too about everything.
Is that him trying to confess his feelings to her? You know I'd die for you. It's the worst confession ever.
I hate it. It's not a good love confession. I will cut him a tiny bit of slack because he's like a traumatized 16-year-old boy. But like it's exactly. But it's not a good love confession. To anyone listening, don't do this. Don't do this if you're in a relationship.
I mean, even if Lucy hadn't, you know, just seen the fetch, and before the fetch also, she probably saw Lockwood die as well. You know, the poltergeist ripped him, threw him right away up to the ceiling. That's the last thing that she saw. Before she hit her head and it all went black, wasn't it? So when she wakes up underneath, she almost starts crying because she thinks Lockwood's dead. So yeah, and then Lockwood appears and yay, he's alive, and then he says, "Oh, I'll die for you." It's like, could you not?
Could you not?
But could you not though?
Could you not?
I just saw you dead like twice. Now you're alive. Let's cut this conversation there. Yeah.
So with all that being said, so they've now acknowledged their feelings for each other, even if they haven't said them that explicitly. They're both well aware of them. She leaves. But then the creeping shadow, she comes back at the end. And the whole, like, the scene with the cape, and we'll have the pleasure of each other's company for a little while longer. But then we get to the empty grave, and they are not a couple.
Are they not?
They act like a couple, but they're not a couple.
Are they not? Because they're acting very coupley. I don't know. Like, I always thought the argument at the beginning of the Hollow Boy reads very coupley to me. It's so much like an angry girlfriend cornering her boyfriend, all the body language, all of that, until he goes into boss mode with his desk. TCS, I mean, everyone says, you know, that's the Getting Back Together book. It's
a romantic comedy in disguise. It really is.
It is. You know what? I don't know if you remember, but Stroud had his notes that he showed on one of the interview things that got.
Oh yeah.
I just looked at them and I thought, wow, okay, like, number one, this is why we all think, wow, Stroud is like a master writer and we could all learn stuff off him just by reading the books. And number two, what the hell is that level of plotting? Because the note for TCS was, I think it was, Lockwood and Lucy's relationship mirrors the plot movements. Oh no, it was the other way around. The plot movement has to mirror Lockwood and Lucy's relationship for TCS. Yes. It was all baked in there. But yeah, like, there could be an argument made, can't it? Like, they could have even been an official couple before the Hollow Boy. And Lucy just doesn't mention it because she's telling us about the ghosts.
I mean, if that's the case, then they are a terrible couple. They are not communicating at all.
I mean, they're teens. What were you like when you were a teenager?
Well, let's not talk about that. I will say that
we repress the memories for a reason. Yeah.
I wrote an adaptation of all of the books into screenplay format as a continuation of the show. And I put them together at the end of The Creeping Shadow. I had them get together, I had them kiss, and then they were a couple through the empty grave, and it changed nothing. The empty grave was exactly the same. They're having the exact same couple arguments.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't change that much. if they are officially a couple at the beginning of The Empty Grave. And frankly, it makes Lockwood giving her the necklace of undying devotion make more sense in some ways because they're already together.
Well, and he takes her to meet his family,
He does.
which is a big step, in a relationship.
It is.
It's not like she has to work hard to impress them, though. Their approval doesn't even matter. Even if they came back as visitors, unless they were like flipping her off or something, Lockwood would have no idea if they disapproved.
Right, she could just say, no, they love me, it's great.
Yeah.
So we've kind of traced the evolution of their relationship throughout the series, but and kind of how Stroud...
Was there much evolution, though? I mean, maybe they were kissing in the screaming staircase. Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe.
No.
Well, probably not. Probably not, but you never know.
I think the Whispering Skull is about as early as you can get for that.
Yeah. I mean, well, we see the evolution, not, the development. It's like subtle, like we said, because Shroud isn't saying any of the stuff explicitly. It's a lot of reading between the lines. And we also see that through other things he does, through Lucy's character in particular, through his writing. And I mean, it comes down to, we've talked on this podcast numerous times before already about how Lucy describes Lockwood and just like her unhinged descriptions of him that are so not subtle at all. Like, he's elegant and poised and graceful, and I think I took all of those words from like the same paragraph about him just to kick off.
You also get a lot of her reactions when he is being really nice to her. Like she talks about how it gives her warm, fuzzy feelings. And when he's mad at her, her tummy feels bad. There's the one at the beginning of The Whispering Skull, I think, where she's like, oh, he's like showing her rapier moves, the Kuriashi turn. And she's like,
yeah,
Kuriashi. Isn't it made up?
It's made up, but yeah, it's supposed to be Japanese, and if it's Japanese, it's kuriashi, chestnut legs.
Okay, but she says, I had a fluttery feeling in my tummy and my legs felt weak. It was probably the late night catching up with me. I think then she goes and like eats a donut to fix it.
There's some other scene as well. I can't even remember what happens, but she said like, oh, yeah, my stomach turned. It must have been the sandwiches.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a Winter Guide, and she has it again at the beginning of The Whispering Skull when she thinks she sees Lockwood, but it wasn't even Lockwood, but she's still like, oh, my stomach, just because she's so nervous about seeing him. It's very cute, honestly.
Is that
Very
at the
relatable.
beginning of The Creeping Shadow?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Think it's Lockwood.
Yeah, it's at the furnaces, isn't it?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's at the furnaces. I don't know what I said, but I meant to say The Creeping Shadow. Yeah, so Stroud just gives us so many like fun details like that are very typical crush behavior in the books, and they really lend to the development of their relationship that we see.
I will say I've seen at least one person, I think it was on Twitter, who said they read the relationship as platonic. They thought they were platonic best friends. And I kind of don't want to take that away from somebody who wants to read it that way. There's nothing in the books that says you have to think this is a romantic relationship. Right up until the Necklace of Undying Devotion. And that one's a little bit hard to get around.
My dad gave my mum this necklace when he proposed to her, and I'm giving it to you because we're such good besties.
I mean, but I also don't want to negate that friendship is an incredibly important part of a healthy relationship, and many relationships develop from friendships. So I think I understand why people have that reading of it, even if I maybe see it differently, as would be exhibited by this entire conversation thus far.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, the whole idea of people being friends and then turning into a romantic relationship is kind of a very classic trope of the genre of romance. And Stroud also uses a bunch of other tropes in his writing of Locklyle. And the thing about tropes is that makes them interesting is that they're super common in romance in general, but they're good building blocks for creating a narrative arc because they're something familiar. So Stroud uses them in his writing to kind of make Locklyle compelling because we're like, oh, we know these things. We like these things. But he also does some fun things where he subverts them and he kind of twists them to keep things interesting. And I mean, if you follow a trope exactly note by note, every time. It gets boring, but he does some fun things where he kind of switches up. But
I also think the fact that he's developed these characters really well and really deeply, regardless of the relationship, or outside of the relationship, independently, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I think that helps make it unique. It feels like two humans getting together, not two tropes.
We are, just to butt in here, we are actually going to have a future episode about Locklyle, which focuses more on their individual characters than this overall kind of macro relationship romance genre look that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, we'll get into all that. But yeah, it's, they are very unique people, and we get to see their evolution. And one of the big tropes that they definitely fit is kind of related to this like long evolution, which is their kind of a very classic example of a slow burn romance that develops over a long period of time. So they might be attracted to each other at first sight, but it takes a long time for that relationship to develop and become something more official.
The slow burn makes sense because it's not what the books are about. They're not romances. Stroud has said he wasn't writing a romance. They're mysteries. They're ghost-fighting, paranormal teens saving the world, having a few laughs as they do it. So having a slow burn kind of going... And I have to say, this is my favorite kind of romance, actually, is like there's something else going on that we're focused on, and we are partners, we are teammates, we are friends trying to save the world together. And at the same time, forming this human connection and going from trusting each other and liking each other to something deeper. One of my favorite, I don't want to call it a trope even, but it's one of my favorite arcs.
Yeah, I like those ones too. I mean, I was just thinking if it was flat out like a romance series that was a slow burn, it would have to hit a couple more tropes, wouldn't it? There'd have to be fake dating in there, because that always seems to pop up in a slow burn. There's no fake dating.
It's very popular. It's very popular as someone who has written a fake dating fic.
But, there'd be a bunch that he'd have to hit. But because, as you say, Lizzie, they're focused on the ghost, they're focused on the mystery. It's all about the action and what's actually going on. So their relationship is allowed to develop really organically.
The one thing that can sometimes happen in books or media in general that has a slow burn romance is that it can just get so drawn out that it gets annoying. But I never feel that way about Lucy and Lockwood. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think it really gets to, the fact that there's so much other stuff going on. Like, they're too busy with the plot at some points to, like, actually focus on having a romantic relationship. Like, they have the world to save. They have conspiracies to uncover,
And a lot of things just happen so quickly as well. We haven't, with the timelines that we've posted, you can see, like, some books happen in about 5 days' time. Nobody sleeps. There's definitely no kissing going on.
And I think the best explanation for why they're not maybe officially a couple in the empty grave is just there's too much else going on. Who has time, who has room in their brain to think about a relationship? And it's their first relationship. When they're trying to both keep an agency afloat in a very regulation-heavy world and at the same time, uncovering the source of the problem and Marissa and Penelope and all of that. So I think that is the best explanation for why they're not official.
They probably come back from Oldbury Castle and Lockwood's got all these plans to sweep Lucy off her feet, and then all of a sudden Penelope Fitz turns up at the door and says, hey, yeah, by the way, I'm going to murder you if you talk. And they kind of go out the window because it's no longer up the top of the priority list.
Right.
It's that same list he started at between Aikmere's and when she resigned, he started a list. He picks it back up at the end of the Creeping Shadow. He picks it back up at the end of the Empty Grave.
Exactly. He keeps getting derailed by the plot, like I said. He's got a lot going on. He's very annoyed about it. And I mean, they also have their own trauma to deal with, too. Like, neither of them are particularly emotionally expressive people. Lucy gives Lockwood a lot of trouble for not being emotionally expressive, but she's not very open either, sometimes with her feelings.
See the hollow boy and jealousy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Even like the Creeping Shadow, there's a scene where they're all in the inn and everybody's chatting and playing or whatever. Lucy's just sitting at the side like a wallflower. She's not talking. She's not, she's not getting involved. She's happy to just be quiet and watch.
Watching Lockwood's elegant brow.
No, I think Lockwood goes and joins her.
Aw.
But yeah, like she's not, she's not in the middle of it talking about herself, chatting with everyone, opening up. No, she's not.
And she, I mean, at least as far as we know, she never confesses her feelings up to that point either. So, Lockwood would really be putting himself out there to say something in many ways.
Mm-hmm. She doesn't even confess it in her narration until right at the end, does she?
No, she does not.
And I think she gives very little away. I think the show Lucy is much more expressive. There's this feeling in the books that book Lucy keeps her cards very close to her
The thing
vest.
is that when you just read through the books, you think actually Lucy is very expressive because her narration is so rich. But when you're like ripping the books apart because you're trying to write fic or you're trying to create a podcast, you realize, oh wait, Lucy, actually, the Lucy that other people see is very, very quiet and quite reserved. And I think that is kind of something that Ruby acted really well in the show, because in the show, Lucy's got all these little half smiles.
Yes.
Or half frowns. Yeah.
Yeah, she's, especially compared to Lockwood, who has his, megawatt grin all the time.
I mean, Book Lucy's got her Carlisle
she's
grin,
very-
doesn't she? That she pulls out when they're running into
Yes,
danger
she
because
does.
she's not reckless at all. No, that's Lockwood. But
She's not an adrenaline junkie at all.
she's got her Carlisle grin. Yeah. But it's either, when they're running into danger or when she wants something, she pulls it out very deliberately.
Of course, Kips and Holly both think it's a very aggressive, grimacy kind of grin. We never see anyone else's reaction to it. I'm not sure that other people think it's as happy as she's meaning it to look.
Lockwood always seems to smile
Lockwood,
back.
yeah,
but
that's just
Lockwood.
Lockwood. So those are a lot of the tropes that they fit very well. We've kind of dived through all of those, but there's also some nice subversion of tropes, and I think the smiling gets to one of my favorite ones, which is one that's very common, is a grumpy sunshine trope where one person in a couple, usually the man, is a grumpy guy, and then he has this sunshiny girlfriend, which I love Lockwood and Co. because
Inuyasha and Kagame. What is it? Toradora does it.
yeah,
I think we can all name about 5 just off the top of our heads.
it's
I'm sure.
super, super common. But I love that Lockwood and Co. is kind of the reversal of it, because Lockwood is the sunshiny, grinning one. He's Lucy's light, and she's just I'm awake. I'm here.
Yeah, stomping about the place, holding a skull.
Exactly.
She needs her manic pixie dream agency head. Manic pixie dream agency head.
I love that so much. I mean, that's really Anthony Lockwood. And
Do you know who they remind me of a little bit?
who?
They remind me a little bit of Scully and Mulder. Between him wearing the suits and her wearing the skirts and even her haircut in the show, and him being, happy and excited and let's go get it, and her being serious and
You know what? Yeah.
not as much scientific for Lucy, but still.
So I'm gonna commit a fandom crime, and I'm gonna tell you I've never watched the X-Files. So
Okay, well,
I have only seen clips. I'm thinking I'm showing my age here. I'm a bit too young. I remember it being really big, but I was about 10.
Okay, well, I was a teenager and I had some friends who were really into it and really loved it. And it was such a good slow burn. It went forever. And because it was exactly like this, they are focused on other things, other problems, and they are working together as teammates, as partners. It did go on way too long, but it was very good for quite a while.
I say, Mr. Stroud, were you an X-Files fan? Did Lockwood and Co. start out as an X-Files Sherlock Holmes crossover?
I mean, it kind of, I guess, is. I know enough about the X-Files to say that, at least. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that Stroud does that is interesting is he does a lot of, sometimes he teases us with the potential of these romantic tropes, and then he yanks them away. And it's actually kind of funny compiling this list, because I didn't even realize how many times he had done it until we started going through notes for this podcast.
Yeah.
I think the big one that I personally noticed, because it's one of my favorite tropes, is in The Creeping Shadow when they go to the inn. There's all the conversations about, there not being enough beds for everyone. You're like, oh my God, this is going to be one of those there's only one bed moments, and they're going to end up sharing a bed and have a dramatic moment. No. He rips it away from us immediately.
Clearly, I don't read enough romance because I did not think that that's where that was going.
I did wonder. I thought, okay, so Lockwood and Lucy are going to end up sharing a room, but how is this going to like be finangled? Because there's 2 girls and 3 boys, and normally you would split it along gender lines, and that is what ended up happening. But I was not expecting, I was not expecting the normal thing to happen. I was expecting the trope.
The big ones for me are the dramatic moment when, like, he saves her or she saves him and they're staring at each other. And instead of, I don't know, a kiss, an embrace, she screams or she slaps him. Right? La Belle Dame.
Yeah.
She bursts into tears and slaps him on both cheeks at the same time.
Honestly, that's something that I wish we could have seen Cameron act out. Because he is so expressive.
I think Ruby would have really killed the double slap, I have to say.
Oh, she would have been, they would have been so good. It is painful to me that we will never get to see that on screen. That's true.
Never say never. Never say never.
But
The beginning of TSS, the one I always think, when they fall out of the iron circle and he falls straight on top of her, chest to chest and everything. Yeah, but even then, there's no like moment of, oh my god, this is awkward, because Lucy cracks her head on the floor.
which is very funny, actually.
Oh gosh, it's one of those like, it's a trope, and in a romance novel, it totally would have been a moment, but this is actually more like real life, and instead, it's very uncomfortable, and please get off me.
Exactly. And even like, the most dramatic romantic moment of the entire series, when Lockwood is trying to give her the necklace at the end of the empty grave. Even then, they don't get to have their dramatic moment. They are interrupted by Kips, of all people, who is like...
I mean, before that, Lucy hands it back as well.
Yeah, she doesn't realize it. She doesn't know she's in a rom-com, okay?
She's oblivious.
She thought she was in a paranormal teen mystery.
Tibiorska's got that comic up on Tumblr somewhere. If you haven't seen it, you should go and see it, where Lockwood shows her this necklace and she looks at it and goes, oh wow, neat, and just hands it straight back to him.
Where's the lie in that? Tell me where's the lie. That's what she does.
That is just what happened.
So yeah, there's so many fun moments where like Stroud really like does that with them. And I mean, it gets back to what we were talking about earlier with they're written very subtly. Even though he's using these tropes, he's still twisting them to make them fun and interesting and unique for who they are. And, all these things that happen, these are fitting for them as a couple, that they like would not basically take advantage of these moments because they're not ready to yet.
They're young, aren't they? They're so young. I remember like my first boyfriend when I was like 14, we started dating. I really liked him, but then we were dating. It was just too much pressure and I avoided him for about 3 weeks, even though I liked him. I'd see him coming and I'd run the other way because I was just young.
That sounds like some of my, early aborted relationships.
I think that really gets to the final kind of point we have for today about Locklyle, which is that they work so well because they are so intensely relatable to anyone who's ever been a teenager with a crush. There's other things going on. They're running a business. They're fighting ghosts. They're, like I said, uncovering uncovering conspiracies and doing all these other things. But at the end of the day, they're just like teenage girl with butterflies and teenage boy trying to impress her.
But they're stuck on the world's longest group project together and they just can't get off it.
That's a great way to summarize Lockwood and Co.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking about this quote. I don't know where I heard it first. But the quote is, "We did not spend our days gazing into each other's eyes. Most of the time our gazes met and entwined as they looked at a third thing." And I find this to be very true in relationships, the strongest relationships. You can't sustain gazing into each other's eyes, even as you chase miscreants across London. That's not sustainable. But doing things together in partnership is a really strong foundation for an actual relationship, one that's going to stand the test of time. So I love these 2 kooky kids. I'm rooting for them to make it all the way. And I think they could, because they have such a strong foundation for their relationship.
They really do. And it is so well described and so well written by Jonathan Stroud. So we have to give him props for that and how he shows us that through the writing of this series.
Misty, insert some applause here.
Well, and with that, I think that's all we have for today. I'm sure we're going to talk about Locklyle a ton more in the future. I know we all could probably stay on this for hours more today, but we will let everyone go to sleep.
And I think our very next episode, we're going to dig into the Hollow Boy, which is that really, really meaty bit of their relationship where it kind of all goes wrong briefly.
Whose fault was it? Well, tune in and hear us argue it out.
Yeah. So tune in for that and more. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media and on our website. You can also email us at hauntingthenarrativepod@gmail.com. The links to all of that are in the show notes. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for being here today.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
We did also want to add something very quickly because it is early February, and if you haven't read the books in a while, there is a wonderful podcast called The Problem, which is going through the books section by section, and they are just about to start their Empty Grave arc. So, if you need a refresher, you want to hear the bits that we were just talking about, go ahead, look them up on Spotify. You won't regret it.
That's true, because we just did the whole timeline in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's a true deep dive. Okay.
Awesome.
Well,
Thanks, guys.
Lizzie, Natasha, great talking to you as always.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye.